Yeah. Hold on. Hold on a second. I'm gonna take off my name badge.
You're so high maintenance. This is the ASMR episode.
If you said anything, I didn't hear it.
I would never say anything about you to your face.
I'm sure. To my face, that's correct. Hello and welcome to It's the Greatest Show, Man, the show where we talk about the musicals you love and why they're great and why they suck. I am your host, Brantley Wheeler, and with me as always is my co-host, Emily Chavone.
I'm assuming you said something, but everything just glitched. I heard half the intro, and then it sped through what you just said.
I literally said the entire thing. Do you want me to do it again?
You don't have to. If you're recording,
sure
I
that?
trust that it's there. If you said something to me after what's scripted, didn't hear it. It just went, why they're great, and blah, blah, blah.
Okay. Nope. I said the whole thing, and I was waiting for you to respond, and then you're just like...
Yeah, I was waiting for the video to catch up.
Apparently never caught up. I thought about this today and thought it would be a very funny thing to talk about because you've talked about taking notes and things like that.
Uh-huh.
It's like, for anyone out there who is happening to listen to this, you definitely should see the difference between Emily and I about how we take notes. Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't hardly take any notes at all.
Did you save them to the drive?
No.
Oh.
I just go off the cuff usually. Like I might have how I take notes is like this. What are we going to talk about? Cool. We're going to talk about Hadestown today, right? So I have Hadestown, and then I have set, costumes, performances, songs I like. And that's pretty much all I have written. I don't have anything else. Except on a couple of occasions where it's a show that I don't really know that well, something like we've done Bat Boy, right? I'll take quite a few notes about Bat Boy or Company, but I don't really take notes on shows I like and then just kind of go with it. Versus you, who you just straight up told me, "Oh, I took, hey, we're getting ready to start. Oh, hold on, I'm still taking notes. I have 2 whole pages of notes."
Honestly, I'm kind of stressed out that I only have 2 pages of notes. I have bullet points that I didn't fill in. The only link that I have is the Wikipedia page, and I'm just terrified that I'm going to forget some of the thoughts that I want to share with you.
Well, here's the thing. I have multiple. Here's what I normally do. I have a little bit of notes, and then I have multiple web pages pulled up so that I can look and see if someone wants to talk about something specific. I just go to that web page and I can look at it.
Yeah, I have that too, but I also like to have... honestly, this could be a fully scripted podcast, and that would make my life a little easier. To be totally clear, the depression monster has got me in such a hole that I'm not even anxious. That's the level that we're at. But I'm a tiny bit stressed that I only have 2 pages of notes. Under summary, I have a blank bullet point. So you're just gonna cover the summary because I didn't write one.
Oh, you want me to summarize?
You're gonna summarize the show, yeah, because
okay.
I'm not prepared.
Okay. So we'll talk about this then. All right. So today we are talking about a show that we actually both really liked, and it's not one of our eternal conflicts of I love the show, you hate the show, or vice versa.
Yes.
This is one we both saw and both really, really liked.
Yeah.
So Hadestown, right?
Yeah, Hadestown.
We saw the tour. It came through town. 2-3 weeks ago?
Yeah, a month ago at this point.
A month ago, yeah, something like that.
At time of recording.
Right, at time of recording. It's been about a month since we've seen it. And, man, it was so freaking good. But, okay, so let's talk about what Hadestown is about, in case you haven't seen it. Hadestown is based off of, first off, it's a sing-through musical. It's not really your traditional stop and start musical, I guess. I don't know what else to call it there. But... it's a musical with a music book and lyrics by Anais Mitchell, and it tells us version of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, Greek myth. If you don't know that story, it's real sad, but this story is told in such a way that you're still rooting for them at the end, even though you know how it's going to end, especially if you're familiar with the Greek story. But yeah, anyway, to kind of summarize what happens, Eurydice is a young, poor woman who comes into town, and she meets Orpheus, who is a young poor man who is the son of a muse. I think that's right. Yeah, a muse, because not a fate. The fates are different. The fates are in the show. Muse is different. He's the son of a muse who is adopted by Hermes in this version of the show. And they fall in love, and he has the ability to make spring return by singing a song, but he becomes so focused on this song that he kind of neglects Eurydice, and she ends up going to Hades for comfort, basically. And, you know, in not so many words, she dies, right? She goes to Hades. She dies. And when Orpheus finds this out, he decides he's going to go into Hades and rescue her. And, you know, to kind of sum up everything here, it doesn't quite work out the way that we always kind of hope it will, without spoiling too much. Sound good?
Yeah, we can have a spoiler section later.
Sure. Okay, so what do you want to talk about first? Initial thoughts?
I just want to mention like productions, especially because this
sure.
show is special because it has a very long public history, beginning in 2006, and evolved from kind of a folk opera to what we know as Hadestown now. And if you're interested in that, just go watch the Wait in the Wings video, because we're not going to do it better than that. But it's really interesting.
Shout out to Wait in the Wings.
Yes. Thanks, Brendan. It opened on Broadway in 2019 and won 8 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, Best Original Score, and a couple Performance Awards. And it also won the Grammy for Best Musical Theater Cast Album, and it's scheduled to open the West End in 2024.
Woo!
So that's exciting. Notable actors in the original Broadway cast are Reeve Carney as Orpheus, Eva Noblezada as Eurydice, Patrick Page as Hades, Amber Gray as Persephone, and Andre DeShields as Hermes. But lots of amazing people have played those parts, and the cast we saw on tour was also excellent.
They absolutely were.
Yes, enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah. Though, do we? I don't know. We want to go ahead and talk about that now?
We can.
We can. Okay, so let's talk about the tour. I know, like, having watched the Wait in the Wings video and having not seen it on Broadway, I do know some notable changes that they made from the touring version with the set specifically, because what they do in the Broadway show, they can't really take on tour, right? Like, you know, so spoilers for the show, right? Eurydice doesn't make it out. Like, how they basically, what they have to do is that Hades is like, well, I'll let you leave with her, but she has to walk behind you the entire time. And he's like, okay. And they sing a song about it. But as soon as he exits out of Hades, he turns around to see her, and she's still in the cave, or she's still in Hades and he's out. So, like, one of the stipulations was if you turn around while she's still here, she stays here forever. Mm-hmm. So she basically just gets sucked back down into Hades, and then that's the end of the story. But I know in the Broadway production, there's a really cool freaking turntable that they use for, like, and it's utilized really, really well in the tour as well. But I know, like, I believe it was a turntable that had like a pit in the middle, and then when he turns around to see her, he steps out and turns and looks at her, and then she just sinks back down into the floor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If any of my students are listening to this, we don't condone slime tutorials in this family, but one may or may not have been playing on my phone this morning as I was preparing for this recording, and they use it a lot, that turntable, and it comes up and down into the floor. So there were multiple moments that we saw where, like, Hades and Persephone, for example, are standing in the middle of that turntable and the ensemble is moving around them. In the Broadway production, that raises up, so they're even, like, higher above, so you get better sightlines. And then when Persephone first goes back to Hadestown with Hades, it drops into the floor. So they utilize that a bunch during on Broadway during the show. Mm-hmm. And obviously they couldn't do that on tour because I don't know, I just feel like the Art Center would be pissed if you had to cut out their floor every time a tour came through.
Probably. And, obviously not every touring venue is going to have a pit in the floor.
Right.
So what they wound up doing was they just had, like, this big, looked like kind of like a garage door almost. And then they used that, but it opened a top and a bottom, so it kind of, like, mouthed open and closed.
Yeah.
Right, more or less. I don't know.
I thought that was really effective. I didn't really feel like we lost anything by not having, like, I get the thought of Hades being the underworld and like her being sucked back down into the underworld, but like I didn't really lose anything by not having that effect. I thought that was a really creative alternate.
I agree. Yeah, it was pretty great. I want to just talk about the set for a minute because that whole set is just incredible. It's designed to look kind of like a seedy bar. It's kind of what it looks like an old school kind of like out of time looking seedy bar. And then at some point, all of the walls separate out, and they have just these straight columns of light that shoot into the audience like a blinding light.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't expecting that, and that's pretty bomb. Like I was like really impressed. Like, oh, this is like when you're in Hades and all the walls open up, and it's kind of subverts convention a little bit because you don't think about Hades as being like this overly bright place, but it works in the context with what they're talking about in the show, like what Hades has done to Hadestown, basically. Then he's made it like a metropolis instead of it being like this seedy, dark underground. I mean, it's still seedy and it's still dark, but instead of being like dark physically, it's dark tonally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just really, really cool.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the scenic design. Like, I think we talked about this already, off mic, but there was one moment in the show, and so let me rewind a little bit. I've been aware of the show since I think fall 2011, and the story behind this is I know you weren't a musical theater major, but you were a theater minor, and so you were probably around enough that this happened to you. Everyone in a college theater program, they have a show that's like their show, the show that they're obsessed with and they'll talk about all the time with anyone who will listen. Sure. And there was a girl in my program, shout out Lindley, she was my roommate at one point. That was her show. Like Hadestown was her show. And so I feel like probably as soon as I met her, like she was like, do you know Hadestown? And would tell me about it. And so it was very exciting for me, like for Lindley when it came to off Broadway, and then when it did come to Broadway, like I remember hearing like, oh, Hadestown is coming to Broadway, and being like, Lindley, your show's coming, yay. So I've been aware of it, and I knew about it in its earlier forms, but I hadn't really seen it or anything, like, or dug into it until I saw it last month. But I am trash for the Tony Awards, and so when the 2019 Tonys happened and they performed Wait for Me, right? Yes. That's the name of that song?
Wait for Me, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So they performed Wait for Me, and something about the imagery of that song just gets to me. And I know the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, like you root for them, but as I'm viewing that with an academic lens, I'm like, it's not going to be a happy ending. And so I'm not going to cry at the end because I know what's going to happen. But I got real choked up during Wait for It. It's just visually stunning. Mm-hmm. There's something about those swinging lanterns.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
the lights,
one of the coolest freaking things in that whole show.
There are some really basic things. Like I do have in my notes here, I'm a for a turntable. I love a turntable. I love like when the lights hit you in the eyes and you're like, oh, it's a train. Like it's a train. That's so cool. Like it's so basic. Or like those lights swinging. That's the most basic thing ever. It's just so good. I can't explain why I love it so much.
Well, man, I'm struggling honestly to figure like what can we talk about. Like I want to keep some semblance of structure in this conversation.
I have a lot of notes.
I know you do. 2 pages is not enough. Chavone over here. But as far as like what, it's not. I just keep thinking like every time I talk about this show with you, I just get pictures in my head of like some just really cool stuff that they did, and I'll just like it's kind of set related, kind of not. This is more of a note or a commentary on direction versus like set or whatever. Mm-hmm. Also acting choices as well. But when Persephone first comes and she sings "Living It Up on Top," right? Persephone, she like the entire opening of the show, Hades and Persephone are sitting up above everybody else, like on a balcony.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hermes starts talking, and I think it's Epic 1. I think it's that one or Epic 2. It's one of those. Which one is it?
I don't know.
It's Epic 1. So he starts talking in Epic 1, and she comes down like this spiral staircase with like her bag of flowers and all this kind of stuff. Spring's coming, all that business. And she stands up to leave, and he like kisses her hand, and then Hades turns his back to the audience and opens up a newspaper, and he's sitting there just reading it. And you're not meant to be watching him necessarily. You're supposed to be either watching Hermes talk or watching Persephone come down the stairs. And I'm sitting here in the angle that I had watching it. She's coming down, and he turns his back and puts out this paper. And she comes down and starts singing Living It Up on top. And then about halfway through the song, he just very carefully like folds the paper, sets it down, stands up, like adjusts his jacket, and then walks through these double doors off stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't see him again until you hear the train whistle for, I believe it's Way Down Hadestown. Yeah, it's Way Down Hadestown is like you hear the train whistle, and then the door opens and he just like walks out. He's got the sunglasses on and all that business. And the guy that played him on tour, Matthew Patrick Quinn, shout out to that guy. What an incredible performance from that guy. But he just comes out and he's just so tall compared to everybody else. This guy's got I don't know how tall he actually is. And like, if you ever listen to this, Mr. Quinn, and you want to tweet at me and tell you how tall you are, or DM me or something, whatever. But like, the guy's got to be like 8 feet tall.
The greatest show podcast at gmail.com. Hit us up because we're curious about how tall you are.
Yeah, please email us how tall you are. No, but he's so perfectly cast in this tour. I mean, I love Patrick Page. I will watch Patrick Page in anything. He's got that like deep, buttery voice that's just like chef's kiss, right? But that's just his natural voice. But Matthew Patrick Quinn, man, he's so good. He's so good in this show. And I don't even know what else I can say. I'm just blown away by his entire performance in this entire show. He's just so stinking good.
Yeah, I really enjoy this iteration of Hades as a character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, we all know I love a tall, dark, mysterious man. Shout out to my husband. He's also written as like effortlessly cool and like calculating and temperamental, and I don't know, something about it. I don't remember a world before like the Disney Hercules movie. And that's the first movie I ever saw in theaters, and something about like that version of Hades just speaks to my soul. And I feel like this does feel a little bit like that. It's
he's not as
quite
erratic,
like sassy or sarcastic.
Right. He's James Woods, who voiced Hercules in the movie, or not Hercules, Hades. Ugh. He voiced Hades in the movie. He does a great job, but it's a very James Woods performance.
Yes. And so I kind of wonder, like, to the people who are older than me and remember a time before Hades was a cartoon with blue fire hair, what was Hades like for other people? And I say that like I'm a baby. I'm 30. I'm not a baby. But like, what should people think of this character? Because I talked to another teacher in our building who really hated this version of Hades.
Really?
Yeah, I was talking with him a little bit about the show, and he said he really hated this version of Hades, like even down to the costume design and the fact that he had like a tattoo sleeve with bricks on it. Like he hated everything about it, and I loved it so much. Mm-hmm. Like I remember sitting at intermission and turning to my husband and saying like, "Where have we seen this guy before?" And we spent the entirety of intermission looking him up to be like, "We know him from somewhere. Like we must have seen Matthew Patrick Quinn in another show. Like we've seen a lot of shows. Surely he's been on a tour and something else that we've seen." And I don't think we've seen him in anything before. And so I don't know if that's the character or if that's the actor. Is it just like a testament to how well he played the role that it feels familiar? Mm-hmm. Or is the role written in a way where you're like, I know this guy from somewhere? And that's kind of haunting.
Yeah,
to be like, oh yeah, like how familiar, like of course Eurydice would go with him. Like, yeah, I know him from somewhere.
Yeah.
He's got cool sunglasses and a deep buttery voice. I'll go. Or if he's worried about singing la 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 in the corner, like I'm going with Hades.
Man. But anyway, yeah. There's not
not to say that anyone
a
was
single
bad.
bad thing I can say about this whole show. Nothing was bad.
Nothing was bad, but I especially liked his performance.
Yeah, especially for him too. And the one thing that is different too, well, first I'll say this, the band being on stage and being so heavily like involved in the show is an incredible decision. And I 100% am totally for this all the time. And you're going to probably hate this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It reminded me a little bit of when I saw Rock of Ages on Broadway because, yes, roll your eyes.
Could you hear me roll my eyes?
I could hear it. But here, so the thing with that is like in Rock of Ages, the band is on stage too. Like they introduce the band in Rock of Ages. They introduce them as Stacey Jax's band, Arsenal, and then they play the opening or whatever. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then granted, in Hadestown, we don't get an introduction to the band. Everyone just kind of comes on stage, and then that trombone player just just goes for it. And from that point on, it's like full steam ahead. You know, all systems go. It's just from like they set the tone for the show. Like the band in combination with Hermes, who in the tour is played by Nathan Lee Graham, and who does a phenomenal job with this part. And the tone set by the band, like the band is almost its own character. In fact, I think you told me one time that you feel like, because you saw it like a night before, or a couple nights before I did, I think. Mm-hmm. And you said, oh, the trombone player is like they're their own character in the show.
Yeah, that's my next bullet point, actually. Like, the trombonist is totally a character, and I wonder if you've played trombone in Hadestown, again, at the greatest show podcast at gmail.com. Is it like a brag in the trombone community to be like, yeah, I just got off the tour of Hadestown? Because like that's a part, like you're opening the show. Honestly, like not that the rest of the band is unimportant, but the other instruments aren't loud and like brassy. Like the trombone, I think, is the instrument that makes this show sound the way that it does. Mm-hmm. If you replaced it with anything else, like if it was all strings, it would be a totally different show. So that's, I would say, probably the most important part of the band.
Yeah.
So and you have to like get up and dance and like do all the stuff. So I'm just wondering, like, is that a brag in the trombone community, or is it only the theater community? Because I would put that at the top of my resume. I'd be like, trombonist, Hadestown.
Well, I would say that, and I think that the pianists do the most heavy lifting in that show.
Yeah.
Because that like the ragtime to piano style that is on a lot of these numbers as well. I think those two probably, I feel like, do the most heavy lifting. Not that, I mean, but every member of that band is integral to this show for sure.
Yes.
There's not a single person in that show that you cannot have.
Yeah.
Everything is purposeful with the music.
Well, and even the Fates play instruments a lot of the time. And as a musician,
yeah, that's
like
true.
I do consider myself to be a musician. I don't know if we've talked about this on mic before, but I have a lot of music training, like more than theater training, actually. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate when you can get 3 women to sing in tight harmony like that, and then they also play the accordion or the violin. Like you know that these people are trained musicians, and it sometimes feels like we, as theater people, the theater community, maybe we kind of are okay with being lax in musicianship because we're doing so many other things. And you're like, oh, well, like you could fake playing guitar because someone in the band could play it for you. Mm-hmm. And I just appreciate that when they don't do that.
Right. And I think, I mean, Orpheus is really playing that guitar too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Like we actually, and this is the thing, like, so speaking of Orpheus, we saw different Orpheuses in the show.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So, who do you remember the name of the actor that you saw?
I pulled up so I'm looking at the Hadestown website. I'm pretty sure this was the guy.
J. Antonio Rodriguez?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was him. Okay.
So you saw him in the show, and he was, and like, what were your thoughts on like his performance?
I thought he was great. So I have also admittedly listened to Reeve Carney sing this, and I am more familiar with his performance just because like that's the one I've heard the most. Mm-hmm. And I think Reeve Carney has a very musical theater voice.
Right.
And J.
Right.
Antonio Rodriguez, now I'm not sure if it was him. He has a much more like rock sounding voice, which I think maybe is more suited to his music, like the music that Orpheus has to sing. I mean, I really enjoyed his performance. I think it's from the Wait in the Wings video where they talk about like how to make Orpheus likable, and it's by making him like sweet and simple and like naive.
Yeah.
And I think he captured that essence really well. Like I totally bought it. Whereas I don't know if I buy Reeve Carney as being like sweet and innocent and a teenager ? Because he's not a teenager.
Right.
Especially next to Eva Noblezada, who's got a very like bright musical theater sounding voice. And I don't think Hannah Whitley was Eurydice when we saw it.
You don't think so?
Do you think that was her?
I think it was. I mean, do you have your playbill?
Not nearby. I might have thrown it away. I don't usually hang on to stuff like that.
I hang on to playbills. That's all I do. That's one of the things I collect.
I never do. I just don't like stuff. Anyway, I can't remember if it was her or not. Sorry. But her voice was very different tonally. Like, it was very dark and like a little raspy, which I didn't mind watching the performance. But then this morning, listening to Eva Noblezada, I'm like, oh, I actually think it sounds better. This was a question I was going to say for later, but we're kind of talking about it now, so I'll bring it up now. What are your thoughts about recasting or like replacement casting in shows? Like, when you're thinking, like, okay, we think about, Eva Noblezada, Reeve Carney, or Eurydice and Orpheus in the original Broadway cast. So eventually they're probably going to leave the show or, the tour or the West End or whatever. So we're going to need to cast new people in these roles. But unique performers have unique performances. So, like, what's most important regarding replacement casting? Are we, like, trying to maintain a look or, like, an aesthetic? Or is it the way they sound? Or should we not care? What are your thoughts on that?
I think when it comes to, like just to use it as an example, stunt casting, right? If you're doing stunt casting for a show, you're casting that person because of who they are. And so, in that regard, I feel like stunt casting is, you're going for a specific person, like how they perform, versus staying true to like the presentation of the show. But I think in this particular instance with Hadestown, that I think you want to cast more for tone than you want to do for necessarily like for looks. Because, right now, Reeve Carney is Orpheus on Broadway. J. Antonio Rodriguez, not a white guy, right? And when I saw it, it was, and I really hope I am pronouncing this correctly, Chibueze Ioma, I think is their name. Again, I don't really know, but they're a Nigerian American, and so, they're obviously not Reeve Carney, but tonally, singing-wise, they sound very, very similar. And it doesn't matter to me, like, I think costuming-wise, like, you do want, like, Orpheus, I think, probably has the most simple costume of everyone as well, unless maybe the ensemble, the workers. But they change a lot, so there's kind of one thing. But I think you definitely want to go for more of that, of the tone, like, I guess the singing tone and the ability to portray that innocence that Orpheus needs to have, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of I'm talking about an example, like in She Loves Me, it's really easy to make George a dick, right? Because of like how he's presented in the show.
Right.
And I think it's very easy in Hadestown to make Orpheus very aloof, or not, or maybe even arrogant to that point. But every actor that has that I have seen so far that has played this part has done a really good job of portraying that naivete. Like, you understand why Orpheus gets so wrapped up in what he's doing, versus thinking like, "Hey, idiot, stop doing this thing," right? And then because it makes you feel like I didn't like, for example, for me, I didn't feel like Orpheus was necessarily neglecting her on purpose, but I
Right.
think it's easy to portray it that way. And so hats off to all these actors who have played this part so far and are able to nail that portrayal of Orpheus that I think is really important for this show too.
Yeah, and I think some of that like arrogance comes from the original mythology, but
Sure.
yeah, I think that in a sense is very important too. Orpheus as a character in this show. But anyway, so like certain things. How do I gather your thoughts? So like Hades, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, I'm aware of 3 performers who have played Hades, and I didn't really dig into this, so sorry, Hadestown stands for not knowing every actor who's ever played Hades, but here we are. Patrick Page, who I believe is a relatively tall man. His understudy from Broadway, who was in the ensemble, who is a very tall man. And then Matthew Patrick Quinn, who is also a very tall man. Are we intentionally casting very tall men as Hades? Or very tall people as Hades? Because we want Hades to be tall. Like, is that part of Hades as a character? Is that a character trait? And this brought me on a little bit of a rabbit hole. So bear with me for a second while we get philosophical. And then like lots of things have kind of brought this thought up in my brain this week. Like the Jimmy Awards were yesterday. And some of the kids talking about, advice that their coaches gave them was to just be themselves and like be their own unique person because they're never going to sound like someone else. So sound like you. Mm-hmm. And so then that like raises the question for me about like when we're recasting shows, how much do we change the character to fit the performer? Like, for example, changing the key of a song. Mm-hmm. On one hand, I do want to be inclusive. I don't want to say someone can't play a part because their voice is not the same as the original performer or what the composer had in mind per se. Right. And at the amateur level, which is where we spend most of our time, obviously I want to do what's safe for my performers. Students, if you're listening, we're not ever going to do Heathers, not just because content, because you can't sing it. I'm sorry. It's not safe for you. We're not doing it. But on the other hand, I do feel like voice type is kind of part of certain roles. Like Hades is a bass. And as a foil, Orpheus is a tenor. Or like Christine from Phantom of the Opera is a soprano. Yeah. I don't want a belter playing that part. And like obviously the biggest example that drives me insane is we lowered the key for Sutton Foster in The Music Man. But I feel like Marion is a soprano role, and there are so few like real soprano roles left on Broadway or on Broadway period that I don't really like when we would like to change the key, which would then in turn change the voice typing for that character. So like, let's say there's a revival of Hadestown in 20 years, and now Reeve Carney is appropriately aged into Hades. Should we make Hades a tenor role now because Reeve Carney can't sing bass? Maybe we just don't cast Reeve Carney. I think there's value in not every part being for every person.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
And I am a tiny bit nervous that what I'm saying is coming, like, I don't want to get political, but I feel like this might come off as transphobic. To be like, a trans woman can't play Marion, maybe because she doesn't have the anatomy to play Marion, but like there are lots of roles. And I just think that one's a soprano role. Or, I mean, maybe Marion's a bad example, and I'm just bitter as a soprano. But like, I think, Christine from Phantom of the Opera, like I feel like that's an important plot point that she's a soprano.
Right. Yeah, it is.
So like, I don't think we should lower that key for a performer who can't sing that part. Like, that's just part of the elitism of Broadway is that, if you can't belt a G sharp 5, you don't get to play Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar.
Right.
Like that high note in Gethsemane is part of the demands of that role, and it goes in both directions.
Yeah, sorry, John Legend. I mean, honestly, though, he can't sing that. He can't. That's like, and I was like, just to go on a tangent. That's something I didn't particularly like about that performance, is because I thought John Legend was a great actor.
I liked him as Jesus,
but he can't sing. He can't sing Bee Gees notes. He's John Legend.
I don't remember. Okay, I don't remember that song well. And
In
I remember
Gethsemane, he sang.
he didn't sing the
He
title.
did not. He didn't even get close to singing the high note.
Really?
He didn't try because he can't sing it.
Here's what I remember from that performance. Okay, this is, wow, tangent of the century. Number one, I liked Sarah Bareilles, and I liked her sandals, and I want some. Number two, there was a lot of glitter. The stage manager and me would have put a stop to that bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to clean up this glitter? Stop. And number three, Norm Lewis was wasted in that show.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Brandon Victor Dixon, too. That's really all I remember. I remember thinking, like, this wasn't bad. And I was being like, too much glitter. And where do I get those sandals?
Yeah. Wow.
Anyway, the point is,
back
like,
to Hadestown.
lowering. So I'm not inherently opposed to changing the key for a performer. Like, the reason I was thinking about this is because Eva Noblezada, who is the original Eurydice, has a very, like, she has a very musical theater sound, in my opinion. She's got that, like, she could be a Disney princess, too. She's got that light, like, mix, like, bright tone, and I think her voice is great. And then Hannah Whitley, who we saw on tour, has a very different sound, and I thought she was equally good in that role, and I think for that role it doesn't really matter. But then that raises the question of, like, do we change keys to fit performers? And I mean, from a musician standpoint, it is kind of a pain to change the key for the entire band.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you listen to pop music, you'll notice that things are in the same keys over and over because that's what's easy for the instruments.
Right.
And so, like, is it fair to change the key for one person when everyone else would have to change the key? Like, the difference, I don't play enough piano, but the difference between C major and D flat major is a big difference on piano, and it's annoying. And, like, sure, it's just moving your fingers, whereas, like, singing is your anatomy, but, like, I don't know. I feel like maybe I can't sing it as well as I could if it were in a different key, but is it worth it? I also think, this is a bullet point in my notes, the Leviton effect is real, and it really bothers me when things aren't in the right key. Are you familiar with the Leviton effect?
I am not.
It is, there was a study done, it was people who don't have perfect pitch who can recognize when things are in the right key or in the wrong key. And it's real, and it impacts me a lot. I don't have perfect pitch, but I can tell when things are even a half step off. And when I moved from New York to South Carolina for college, things on the radio were in a different key, and they were just like a half step off, but it drove me nuts. And so, like, even like one step off, like F major and G major have different sounds. It's about the timbre. I don't know how to explain it, but then, like, C major and D flat major, they have a different sound. Don't tell me they sound the same. So my cry to the music people on Broadway changing keys, please, can we use the circle of fifths to pick a tonally appropriate key? Let's go up a fourth or fifth or down a fourth or fifth. Stop moving things like 3 semitones. I can't. I cannot. And that's my music snob cry for the day. So yeah, this is something I'm trying to figure out how I feel about it.
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
So I'll be honest, you know this about me. I can't read music. I don't know. I can't even tell when something's off key. Not really, until I'm singing something and you're like, "You gonna stay in one key or I don't know," So, like, I'm like, "Oh, I'll try. I don't know what that means." Anyway, I guess the only thing I can really contribute to this conversation is just stylistic differences, because it's something that we've talked about as well between a very specific song in the show, if you kind of know where I'm going with this, with Hey Little Songbird, comparing the recorded version of Patrick Page on the album, which sounds very Leonard Cohen-y, right?
Yes.
It's very kind of like, I'm not even going to attempt to sing that low because I can't, but, just like very much like speak singing versus Matthew Patrick Quinn, who had a much more kind of a jazzy style of singing it. And that's and that respect, that's why I don't know if it really matters that much, because they didn't do it the same way, and I think that's fine. They both sound great. So I don't really, my contribution to this conversation is, as far as like doing that, I don't think it matters as long as the intention is there. And I think they nailed that on the tour, you know, with Matthew Patrick Quinn. The persona of Hades is more important than how he sings it.
Mm-hmm.
But he should still be a bass. I will agree with that. I do think that he should still be a bass. There are already so few bass roles on Broadway or in musical theater in general that you're doing a disservice to the show by changing that.
Right. Yeah. I think I'm going to sit on this and we can revisit this in like a year or two and see if I hate past me. But like, I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging that like people have different voice types and like maybe certain roles just aren't suited for certain voices. And we shouldn't like, I mean, the problem with like the Sutton Foster and the Music Man thing is that was a stunt cast.
Right.
But I think we could have stunt cast someone else in that part. I mean, Sutton Foster has star power in the theater community. I mean, we're in the theater community, so I don't know.
Right.
I don't really live outside of the theater community very much. But does she have star
fine.
Power outside of the theater community? I don't really think so.
I don't think so. I mean, honestly, like, I know who Sutton Foster is because I'm a theater person too, but before Shrek, I really didn't know who she was.
Oh, I did. But
I didn't.
That's okay.
But then again, you know, like, I kind of came into this a little bit later. Not that, like, I mean, I've loved musicals my whole life, but I grew up watching, like, Golden Age musicals. So it's
your favorite musical is Cats. We know.
Yeah, yeah.
You can name every cat, but
I can name a good handful of the cats. Thank you very much.
God.
You want me to start? I'll do the Joseph Colors thing
please
again.
Stop.
Anyway.
Yeah, but like there were sopranos, I think, who have the same kind of star power within the theater community who could have also played that part.
Fair.
And would have pulled the same draw. I think the real star power behind that show was Hugh Jackman. Like, that's the name that people outside of the community were going to recognize.
Right.
And I also don't think he's right for that part, but like that's neither here nor there. The fact that like we changed the key for a performer, it's like, I don't know how I feel about that. I think at the amateur level, maybe I'm more okay with it because in our case, like, we're working with children.
Right.
So their health is more important than anything. But on Broadway, I mean, there were sopranos right there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Yeah. So anyway, that was something like and again, like, not to say that hold on, I gotta pull up my cast list again. Hannah Whitley, I like really enjoyed her performance. There was nothing wrong with it. It was very different from Eva Noblezada, but there was nothing wrong with it. Like, I enjoyed everyone's performance in the show.
Yeah, for sure.
But it made me think about that stuff.
All right, so because we're still talking about the cast right now, I'll say this: there is a couple things that I don't love about. I have specific thing. There's two very specific things that I didn't particularly care for with the tour, and then one with the Broadway recording. Okay. And this, I'm probably going to get flack for this, get hate for this. That's okay. But I really liked Nathan Lee Graham as Hermes. I didn't love him.
Mm-hmm.
When he first came out and he started Road to Hell, it was like I have listened to the recording so much with Andre DeShields that I'm used to the kind of subtle smoothness that he has with it. Nathan Lee Graham doesn't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just because they're different in performers. But like, specifically, I'm thinking of the Chugga Chuggas at the very beginning of the song for Road to Hell. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So when you're listening to the recording, you kind of glide in a little bit, like tonally, it's kind of a glide in with like Andre DeShields being like Chugga 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 Chugga, and it's kind of glides in, and then everyone comes in after that. When I saw it with Nathan Lee Graham, it was like being punched in the face, in a nice way.
He did give a very intense
but it was like
performance.
Chugga 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 Chugga. It's like immediately I was like, good God. And that's not to say that I didn't like his performance. I loved his performance, but that I was like, oh, okay, we're starting here instead of here, and that's fine, you know. Starting up high instead of down low. You know, it's not great for me to show hand gestures on a podcast, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
But you know what I mean, you know.
I was just so engaged in your storytelling that I didn't even realize you weren't talking. You were just gesturing.
Just gesturing, yeah. But anyway, but you get what I'm saying. And then the other issue, I guess it's not an issue, but my other kind of, I don't love it, is with the song Hey Little Songbird on the recording with Patrick Page. I just don't like, Leonard Cohen's fine, but there are better versions of Hallelujah, right? So it's like, I just didn't necessarily love Patrick Page's delivery of that song. I much preferred Matthew Patrick Quinn's version.
I do wonder how much of that is direction, though, because
true.
the slime tutorial that I definitely didn't seek out had that, that live performance still had that same kind of like gravelly quality. I think it's probably one of those things where it's like, oh, you can do this, do it.
Yeah, and like the thing is, like, I don't mind that. It's, I'm not even gonna attempt it because like, I can't do it, so I don't want to even attempt. But that's just something I didn't love about that one specific song. Everything else is great.
And again, like I really enjoyed Matthew Patrick Quinn's performance. Please do more things, and I mean, I wish him all the best, but I hope he continues to tour and stops nearby where we can see him do more stuff. I don't know what other kind of stuff, but all the stuff.
Yeah, and I really would love to see Chibuze Ioma. I want to see him in more stuff too because he was incredible. He was a fantastic performer. I would really like to see him do a lot more, and I hope he does. You know, I don't think he's gonna be. I don't by far do not think he's gonna be one and done. Like, don't think so. Sure. But he's really, really great. And I really, really liked his performance. Anyway, so what else? What's your next bullet point here? You want to talk about costumes? You want to talk about music? What do you want to talk about?
I don't really have any specific like bullet points in that way. As you know, my format is to list the show and then a summary and then highlights for me, and then why it's the greatest show, man, and why it's not. And then I usually have an other section, which is where I included my recasting. But like, I don't know if you want to talk about specific tech elements.
Well, the tech elements, I mean, I've kind of touched on them a little bit. I do love the fact that Hades is so bright at times when they're in Hadestown, like proper. It's super bright, and like even sitting in the balcony, I was in the balcony and as an audience member when at times when those lights came on, like so bright that they're literally blinding you. I mean, it's obviously intentional, but that's such a great element to that show. I honestly don't remember what number it was in, like what song it's in, but it's just so good. There's nothing I really dislike about this show other than like the two things I mentioned that were kind of just incredibly nitpicky things that were like performance or direction maybe instead of like anything design wise. I did really like Hades' costume. I thought it was really cool. His like you mentioned earlier, the brick and mortar tattoo sleeve that he had. And also I really liked his costume is all black and silver except for the back of his vest, which is like this bright red, and I really liked that. I liked Persephone's shift from the green in Act 1 to the black in Act 2, because at that point, you know, her and Hades are more divided, and that in Act 2, beginning of Act 2, like she comes out and Persephone comes out and sings Our Lady of the Underground, and that was great, you know, but she's wearing all black, like she's in mourning during that time, right? Like, like her, like the life that she had is now kind of left her, and now she's wearing black instead of green, and like all these really subtle things that they put in the show that are not immediately apparent, but also obvious at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense as a statement. Yeah. But that's like a lot of that stuff I really enjoyed too. And also just to say, every song is fire in this show. There's not a bad song in this whole show. I think, and the real standouts for me are going to be like Road to Hell, Living It Up on Top, Way Down Hadestown. When the Chips Are Down is a great song. Wait for Me, obviously. I mean, they straight up just have merch for that song. So obviously that's the big one. I think that's the big one in the show is Wait for Me. But Way Down Hadestown is also just so good. Our Lady of the Underground is a great opener for Act 2. To kind of jump back a little bit, While We Build the Wall is an incredible closer for Act 1. And I knew that song was in the show, but I didn't know where it would fall. But it's such a good... the placement of that song in the show is really impactful, you know? And so I thought that was absolutely great. Just, man, I do feel like personally that Act 1 is a little stronger, but Act 2 has all like the big emotional beats.
Yeah.
Save for Wait for Me, which is obviously as right before Why We Build the Wall. So it's in Act 1, like right towards the end of Act 1. That's a very emotional song, but it's one of those weird things where this show is very much the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, but they're really not the main focus. I didn't feel like they were the main focus of the story for a lot of the time. Because it's like it kind of jumps back and forth between them and Hades and Persephone, and then Hermes is there a lot, just kind of walking you through everything. And so like it makes sense to me that they would list all 5 of those characters as being like the leads of the show, right?
Yeah.
Just from how it's presented and how it's written. The chants are really great too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and that I gotta say this too. Shout out to the ensemble of like literally every Broadway show, every musical. They're the freaking meat and potatoes of every show ever, and especially in this show, the ensemble is doing work in Hadestown. They're working super hard, and I want you to know we see that. And like I don't know if you like. That's one of those things I always talk to our kids about is like how important ensembles are to a show. It's like, yeah, you may not get cast in the lead. That's okay. Like the ensemble is where shows are made or broken, in my opinion. Right? I mean, obviously you want to have great leads, but being in the ensemble is such an important part of making these things work. Not every show is going to be a show like John and Jen where there's just 2 people and that's it, right? There are very, very few exceptions, I feel like, to that rule of like the ensemble needs to be very, very strong. Because if you don't have a strong ensemble, shows like Hadestown do not work.
That is a point I wanted to bring up too, because, you know, like being in educational theater, we don't want our students to have this idea, but like whether we like it or not, there is a stigma about being, quote, just the ensemble.
Right. Unfortunately,
and,
yeah.
Like this idea that they are somehow less important because they have fewer lines or featured moments in the show. And unfortunately, I think a lot of shows don't utilize their ensemble well. Like there are, especially if we think of Golden Age.
Yeah, I was about to say
Broadway. It's like they're backup dancers and singers.
Yeah. Like first thing that comes to my mind is like Singing in the Rain. There are 4 leads in that show. Don, Cosmo, and then the 2 girls. I can't take it.
So Don and Cosmo.
Don and Cosmo, and then the lady Don and Cosmo. No, Lena and
their girlfriends. Yeah.
Lena and I can't. Debbie Reynolds' character.
Debbie Reynolds.
Debbie Reynolds. Oh man, I feel so bad for not being able to come up with this. But like those are like the 4. Like the show's about those 4 characters.
Yeah.
And the ensemble is just kind of there as filler. And I do think that a lot of Golden Age musicals do that. Whether or not that's intentional, I don't think so. I think it's just a style of the time. But a lot of shows now, like modern shows nowadays, are seeing the importance of ensembles and I think pushing it forward more. I think Hadestown's a good example of that. Once for sure. Like the ensemble is also the band. You need to be able to do those things and be such a big part of the show. So I feel like that's changing some. I don't know if it's ever going to change completely, and I don't think it should. You know, because there are musicals that are very focused on like these 2 characters or these 4 characters or whatever, or they're what do you call them? They're more like company, where it's kind of everyone kind of has a piece of the pie.
Where it's an ensemble show?
Yeah. An ensemble show. Yeah. Jeez. But
you didn't see the facial expression. You just like pulled the skin down on his face and rolled his eyes at me. Should record the video of this too, so we can see your distress.
Yeah. You can see how much I hate you.
You love me.
That's not. I've never said that.
I have it in writing.
And I will never say that. No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Anyway, moving on.
But yeah, so I just really appreciate that this show, it has a small cast, and I think it probably works better in a smaller venue than a big Broadway house.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it'll be one that, I mean, I hope it runs for a long time, but I think if it needs to move to a smaller house, I think it'll be like a Peter and the Starcatcher or an Avenue Q, where it plays really well off Broadway for a while. So, yeah, I think ensembles are often, in Golden Age musicals, not used to tell the story. It's just a big spectacle moment. And I think like the ensemble performers are, besides learning all a bunch of lines, you don't want weak dancers in your ensemble. In a 42nd Street is the one that I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously you need amazing dancers for that show, and there's a lot of singing. You need good singers as well. So, you're asking for strong performers. It's just that those performers aren't the ones who are talking in between the dances, so the audience isn't attached to them as much. And that sometimes makes people feel like the ensemble is not as important. And so when a show like Hadestown has a smaller cast and has, these 5 members of the ensemble, and then I guess you could, I don't know if we would argue for the Fates being in the ensemble, but they are equally storytellers.
Right. And
they're driving that plot, and they're featured so well. And so I just really appreciate that. And so, yeah, that was one of my why I love the show moments. Okay, I want to talk about the timing a little bit. Again, I don't want to get political.
Right.
But I think it's really interesting that the wall metaphor exists in the show, and that it made it to Broadway when it did. Mm-hmm. Regardless of where you fall politically, it definitely engages the audience. And I think that probably contributed to its success. So I think even if it opened now, we're, kind of 4 years, right? Yeah. It opened in 2019. So we're 4 years removed.
Right.
And we are not under the same president anymore. I don't think it would have the same impact.
Maybe not. I do remember that being a standout for me the first time I listened to it, because it was in the midst of that, the midst of that presidency. So I remember that being definitely something that stuck out to me. And I was curious on how some people would react to that. But I never really heard much about it, or no one ever mentioned anything to me about the significance of that song, or maybe they noticed but just didn't mention it, maybe.
Yeah.
Because looking at the history of the show and how it came to be and all this kind of thing, is that it premiered on Broadway in 2019, right? Mm-hmm. So that was towards the tail end of the presidency there, right?
Well, it's middle.
Middle. Yeah. I was thinking 2016. But yeah, how long this musical's been working. When was that show? I see, look.
Well, that metaphor was definitely in the show well before then.
It was.
So
yeah.
So it's there. I know there was a little bit of discourse at one point where people were like, "Oh, are we making a political statement?" And it's well, not intentionally.
Not intentionally. Yeah, I don't consider it being intentional, because it's in the 2010 concept album.
Yeah, if it's engaging you as an audience member and making you think about stuff, I think then it's doing a good job.
Sure, for sure. And
I don't want all light, fluffy stuff. Sometimes I like shows that make me think.
Sure, for sure. And the metaphor wasn't lost on me, and I feel like maybe at the time where it had opened on Broadway, maybe that was a much more kind of prominent thing and maybe felt more like a political statement. But like I said, looking at the original production that was in the New York Theater Workshop in 2010, it's been there since then, so it wasn't a new thing,
Yeah.
I don't really honestly, I don't, and I know I've done this with previous episodes where I would take specific moments of songs that really spoke to me. There's not really anything in this that I feel like I necessarily need to pull, because I like all the songs in the show. And it is very much like a sing through. There's very, very little spoken dialogue in the show. The one part that was spoken that did stick out to me though was, I think it's before his Kiss the Riot. It's like he starts singing the King of Shadows, King of Shade to Hades, right? Orpheus sings King of Shadows, and he goes, "Oh, it's about me," and I thought that was like kind of a fun moment in the show. It's one of the very few like spoken lines of dialogue that was just like was fun, and I honestly am curious whether that's in the script or not. I mean, surely it is. But then again, I've not seen a script for Hadestown. You can't get one yet. So there's that. I would think it probably was. Because the show, I mean, Hermes comes out talking to the audience, and then he addresses the audience and addresses the band and the performers.
Yeah.
So it's presented in a way like immediately that like, oh, okay, it's this kind of show, but you're not thrown off by any of the audience interaction stuff. And it's nowhere near comparable to something like a Seussical, where you're in the audience running around and like making jokes and doing that kind of stuff with them. It's not that kind of show, and nor should it be presented in that way. At least I don't think so. But I have a love-hate relationship with audience interaction stuff. You know this.
I do know this.
You know this. And so there are times I think it's fine and appropriate, and times where it's not. And I think Hadestown sets it up in a way to where it's like, oh, we're telling you this story, so we are acknowledging your presence. Or I mentioned it once. I'm going to go back to it here. While I was working there, they did Once, right? And the show started out with the ensemble sitting in the house with the audience. Like they had their instruments and they were sitting out kind of at the back of the house with the audience, and they were playing instruments kind of for like as accompaniment to, because it's set up in the way that the main character, the lead male, I can't remember his name, but he's standing up there and he's kind of like busking. Like as the audience was coming in, he's already standing on stage and he's kind of just busking. And then the ensemble who was in the lobby performing would come in and sit in the house with their instruments and play there, and then they'd walk onto the stage. And in that respect, it was pretty cool, but also like they didn't interact with the audience necessarily. They just happened to be there.
Okay.
So it's kind of different. That's different than, say, a Cat in the Hat spraying water on people as he's crying. Like that's different, right? And but like trying to compare something like Seussical to Hadestown are just so different that like I shouldn't even be making that comparison at all. But you get what I'm saying, right?
This tangent brought to you by Brantley's hate of Emily's directing style.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't hate your directing style. I just don't think that we need to be in the audience for every single show.
Look, I just think some immersion is fun. And with the last show we did,
some immersion is
there
fun.
was immersion. It wasn't interactive.
Until the finale, but that's fine because the finale is intended to be that way.
That wasn't interactive. That was immersive.
If you say so.
Well, we probably won't do it for the next show. So.
Good.
Maybe. We'll see.
I don't want to enter from the audience anymore.
You don't have to enter from anywhere.
I don't, and I won't. Anyway.
Oh, okay. I want to talk about. This is a note that I put in this was when you were texting me saying, "Get out of your head, Siobhan." Stop taking notes. This idea of the suffering artist, which comes up in all the things. So like you need to be suffering, or in the show, like in winter, to be able to create the great art thing. Mm-hmm. In this case, Orpheus's magic song that brings spring back.
Right.
And this idea of like, oh, if I can do one great thing, it will solve all the problems. And this theme comes up over and over in musical theater. I think the other like big example that everyone thinks of is Rent.
Sure.
Where Roger's like, I have to write one great song before I die.
And then he writes one mediocre song, and then Mimi dies.
Well, that's what I wanted to say, actually, is I feel like, there's this idea of like the artist suffering to create this beautiful art which I don't really like that idea of like you have to suffer to be able to create good things.
Yeah.
But also the art, like the great art that is created is always the worst art in the whole show. Orpheus's song would, like, if I were a flower, Orpheus's song would make me shrivel up and die. And the same thing, like if I were Mimi and Roger sang that song to me, I would be like, I'd take my last dying breath and like put it over his face and be like, please stop, and then
die. Man, you're so bitter.
It's like it falls into that trap. Like
it does. Yeah, I won't disagree with you there. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other examples. Your Eyes from Rent is awful. I don't think Orpheus's song is good. And I also don't think it sounds good. Like, that's not the best part of anyone's singing voice.
Falsetto.
that it just doesn't, like, it I don't know. It's not good. I haven't heard anyone sing it where I'm like, oh yeah, that is beautiful and would bring spring back. I'm always like, nah. Does it have to be that high?
Yes, I guess. I don't know.
Nah, that doesn't do. I love a tenor, but it does not do it for me.
Everyone knows that flowers love your head voice. That's where everything comes from.
But now, like, my classical music training is like, you're not wrong. Okay, maybe I'm just wrong about this. That's fine.
I mean, you're wrong about a lot of things.
I've been reflecting a lot on how much I've changed as a person in the last 10 years. Like how I'm trying to be like more thoughtful and less bitter, but like some of that bitterness I think is just gonna live with me forever. And this is one of those things.
Sure, why not? So we've talked a lot about how we feel about the show and different aspects of the show. We haven't really developed any type of rating system for like a show, right? Because it's usually like it's either usually something I really like and you hate, or vice versa. And so we don't really have like a rating scale for anything. But I think maybe we should, on this, the last episode of season 1, implement a rating scale. And as
okay,
you want to go to 5? You want to go to 10?
I don't. Are we? So we're comparing each musical on its own, or is this like a tier list?
Not a tier list. Like I don't want to take all 10 and then put them on a tier list. I would want to say like. So we'll just do. We haven't done it on any other episodes, so that's fine. But we're doing it. Let's do it for Hadestown specifically because we're talking about it. On a scale of what do you think, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10?
I feel like even 1 to 10, I'm gonna use a decimal system. So go ahead and choose what you want, and I'll take my anxiety overthinking brain and I'll adjust to your needs.
Okay, let's just do 10. We'll just do 10. And I will say, like, out of all of the shows I've seen, all the shows I've done, I would probably overall give Hadestown an 8 out of 10 because I don't think it's a perfect show, but it's very, very good. And like, there have been Tony Award winning musicals that I don't particularly care for, but this is not one of them. I love the show. I would go see it again in a heartbeat. This is one of the first shows I've ever dropped money to buy merch for. So it's like, that's high praise from me. And like, I also can say this too, that I saw this show with my wife and she kind of knew the premise going in, and I hope she doesn't hate me for saying this, but she's always told me that she is quote unquote emotionally constipated. Like she doesn't react to things as well as like, I'll just say in our relationship, I am the emotional one. I will cry at the drop of a hat, things like that. That's me, not her.
Yeah.
But when we saw this show together, I looked at her during intermission, and all her makeup was running. Her face was just covered in tears, and that to me says a lot. Like, this show is really hitting her on an emotional level that I have not seen any other show hit her before. And at the end of Act 2, at the end of the show, it was exactly the same. Like, she basically started crying and then didn't stop the entire show. And that says a lot for me. Like, that makes me want to like bump it up a little bit. But I'm going to stay solid. Like, I feel like I would give the show an 8 out of 10. Yeah, for sure. Like, yeah. It's pretty up there. It's pretty high for me. Again, I don't think it's a perfect show. But then again, I don't think anything is a perfect show. But that's besides the point.
There is a perfect show this season, but whatever.
If you say so.
What?
What? Have we talked about it yet?
Wait, we haven't talked about it yet, but we will.
Well, you could mention it because like we will have talked about it by this point. Okay.
I'm not a good faker. She loves me. Is gonna get a 100, by the way.
Oh, okay. Out of 10.
Oh yeah, we're sorry. I forgot I was using decimal points and turned it into. So okay, so I would give out of 10. Yeah, actually, honestly though, it would get 100 out of 10.
Okay.
It's so good.
That She Loves Me.
Anyway.
We're talking about Hadestown. Talk about Hadestown.
Hadestown. Okay. I would give Hadestown, I think, an 8.7 out of 10.
Okay.
I know we said 5 to 10, and then while you were talking, my brain changed that into 100. So 87 out of 100, or 8.7 out of 10. I think really falling into that trap of like the musician's song being the worst song, which like I don't think there's a single show where it's like I'm an artist and I'm going to create a thing. Like even Sunday in the Park with George, she's like, I'm an artist, I'm going to create a thing, and you're like, what are you doing, George? That's weird. Like every single show about artists, like it kind of fails in that way for me. And then honestly, the biggest problem I have with the show is the lyrics, and not that they're bad, like they're just not musical theater lyrics in the way that we're accustomed to, or at least I'm accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it works perfectly fine for other genres of music, and I think that's where Anais Mitchell's coming from, and I think this show isn't really like, it's not a traditional musical in that sense. So truthfully, I don't think there's anything wrong with them. But it's not really musical theater writing in my brain.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But she's not necessarily a musical theater writer.
Right. So for me, it's just not like, it's not a perfect representation of musical theater as a genre,
mm-hmm.
which is where I would dock it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. But
I think it's a great show, and I think people should see it. And I think it's a good way in for people who maybe don't like musical theater.
Sure.
Like my husband famously does not like musicals, and he told me he was kind of bored through a lot of it,
mm-hmm.
but he didn't hate the music as much as he hates like musical theater music. Usually.
Okay. Yeah, sure. That's high praise from him.
Yeah. So yeah, I think like it's a B+
Gotcha.
for me, but it's still like as musical theater as art, as a genre, it's a B+. But it's still
mm-hmm.
B+ ain't bad. And I think it was deserving of the Tony Awards that it won, and I'm glad I got to see it on tour. I would go see it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would definitely go see the show again.
It was no An Officer and a Gentleman. No memes were made during the performance.
No. But if they were, they're highly positive memes, which is not really a thing. It's kind of an oxymoronic statement. Highly positive memes. So we have already mentioned that a couple of times that Hadestown did win several Tony Awards. Do you want to talk about what those were, like what it won Tonys for?
Sure. So it won 8 Tony Awards for Best Musical. That's the big one. Best Original Score. Best Performance by an Actor in a Featured Role in a Musical for Andre DeShields.
Very well deserved.
Best Scenic Design. Best Lighting Design. Best Sound Design. Best Direction. And Best Orchestrations. It was also nominated for Best Choreography, Best Costume Design, Best Performance by a Featured Actress, or by an Actress in a Featured Role in a Musical for Amber Gray, and Featured Actor for Patrick Page, and for Actress in a Leading Role for Eva Noblezada, and Best Book of a Musical. So it was nominated for how many? 14? Did I get that right? Yes.
Yeah, it was nominated for 14 and won
which is
8.
a lot of Tonys. I believe
Is a lot of Tonys.
only the producers in Hamilton have been nominated for more. Is that right?
That sounds right. I know, because I think producers in Hamilton are tied for a number of Tonys.
For
one
15
or
nominations.
Nominated, but producers still holds the record for most one.
Or I think they might be tied.
And they're not tied.
No?
I know for a fact they're not tied.
Oh, okay.
Just because The Producers is my favorite musical, so I just know that.
Joseph is your favorite musical.
Joseph, of course it is. Shut up with that. I was looking for this specific one. Hold on. I just clicked Tony Awards, and it was like, here's what the Tony Awards are. I'm like, no, I want the specific, like 2019 Tony Awards. So hold on a second.
That was the Prom was the other big contender that year.
73rd. So the 73rd Tony Awards, what was it up against? It was up against Ain't Too Proud, Beetlejuice, The Prom, and Tootsie. So, I mean, not necessarily like Beetlejuice is kind of its own thing, and we'll get to that, I'm sure, at some point. But looking at its competition, not that necessarily that it was like, I think in this specific collection of musicals, Hadestown is for sure the front runner.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really surprising that it did win. But I don't think any of these are bad, for sure. I haven't seen Tootsie or The Prom or Ain't Too Proud. But, you know, what's next on your hit list?
That was my whole hit list.
That was your whole hit list? Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So 8.7 out of 10 is pretty high. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Yeah, Again, this is a show that we both really enjoyed. Nothing really bad to say except just really nitpicky stuff, honestly.
Yeah, really.
But yeah, nitpicky stuff, and Emily hates art. That's all I know. Anyway.
I just hate art about art.
Hate art about art. There are very few things that are art about art that are like really good. It's also, those also feel really masturbatory. So it's like, I don't know if I necessarily love those anyway.
I don't know, like, what examples are you thinking of like art about art that's good? Because I've been thinking all day about it, and I can't think of anything where I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good example of the thing.
Well, the play Red is really good in that example.
I don't know that one.
You don't know that one? Let me pull it up real quick. I have it, and I've read it.
I think that might be on the list of monologues that I give to my kids, but I haven't read it.
Red is a straight play about Mark Rothko, who's an artist. He did the color field painting, where he'd paint big swaths of color.
Yes.
In an attempt to convey emotion.
Uh-huh.
And he has like an assistant, and he talks to him a lot about art in the process and all that stuff.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's really good. I mean, the original play had Alfred Molina, and he's an incredible actor. So it's like that play in and of itself is really good. That's the only example I can think of that's, quote, art about art, but still really good. It did win a Tony, I think, for Best Play at the time. Let me check. Or it was nominated. And this show was in 2010, so it ran like a long time ago. 'Cause, straight plays don't run nearly as long as musicals do.
Yeah, not usually.
So in 2010, in March 2010, it transferred to Broadway and starred Alfred Molina and Eddie Redmayne. So it's a 2-person play. It's
okay. Very I think I do remember this, or remember being aware of it at some point.
Yeah,
but I've definitely not seen it. I've definitely not read it.
It says it won the most Tony Awards in 2010, including Best Play, and it won Best Performance by a Featured Actor for Eddie Redmayne. Okay. Anyway, so let's do what we always do. Let's Dreamcast this show.
Oh boy,
this show is perfect as it. I think it's not a perfect musical, but the cast that's currently cast that we know of the best is the best cast for the show. But is there anyone else that you think you'd like to see do anything in this show?
I think there are lots of really talented people who could be in the show, and I know what you're gonna say is that your favorite Dreamcast, which have appeared in many of our shows this season, maybe works, but don't do it.
You don't know what I'm going to say.
I know that you're going to say Ben Platt should be Orpheus and Sophia Ann Caruso should be Eurydice, and I just don't want you to.
I'll be honest with you. That did cross my mind, but that's not what I was going to say.
And Hugh Jackman, he couldn't be Hades.
No, he can't be Hades.
Oh, no, is he Hermes?
No.
That's even worse, maybe.
No, I wasn't going to do that.
Okay, go ahead.
So here's what I would do. Just like I thought to myself, what's the thing I could do that would really make you cringe and hate the show?
Oh God.
So I would still put Ben Platt as Orpheus. I'm not gonna lie to you. I would do that just to make
I know you would.
But
and every time he hits those high notes, he'll do that thing where he closes his eyes and turns his head.
Yeah, every time. for every law. La, 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 la. Every time he lists
You know
law.
exactly. You just know. Like, Ben Platt stands. Come for me. The greatest show podcast at gmail.com. He does the thing every time. That's not an acting choice. That's just Ben Platt being weird.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, here's what I'd put. I would put as Hades Christopher Walken. And I can't do a great Christopher Walken impression, but I can just imagine being like, "Hey, little songbird," you know, and it just makes me laugh every time I think about it. And then for Persephone, I would just put in Carrie Underwood just to make you mad.
Are we far enough removed from the NBC Live musicals? Do you think they're over? Like surely there's emotional scars, right?
I mean, I have
Peter Pan
some.
was what, 2015? You have emotional scars from the live musical?
A little bit, just because like I remember watching. I just remember watching Peter Pan and seeing Christopher Walken forget his lines on live TV as Captain Hook, and it just I felt so bad for him, but at the same time I'm like, this is what you get. This is what you get, NBC. But just to say I want to see Christopher Walken play Hades just for the lulz. And I also want to see Carrie Underwood play Persephone because she can't act. She'll just belt everything with that singing Living It Up on Top in a country accent. You know, that's just what's going to happen. And as far as Hermes is concerned, I don't know if I would. I don't have anyone in eye. Maybe I don't know if he can sing, but Giancarlo Esposito.
As Hermes?
Yeah, why not?
He would. I has he ever not played a villain?
Well, I want to be specific. I want to see Giancarlo Esposito as Gus Fring playing Hermes.
Like an evil Hermes?
Yeah. Like he walks up to do the chugga chugga. He's like, I don't do that. Like, or whatever. Just like,
yeah.
That's what I want to see. I want to see Giancarlo Esposito as Hermes, and then Ben Platt as Orpheus. And then, like, honestly, Eurydice, it might as well. You know, it might as well be her. And then Christopher Walken and Carrie Underwood, and then we'll call it a day.
I don't hate Carrie Underwood as Persephone. Persephone doesn't really do anything for me as a character. I don't hate that.
I misspoke. Let's put Taylor Swift in there instead of Carrie Underwood.
I don't know if Taylor Swift could play drunk enough.
I don't know.
I think she could sing it too. I'm okay with Taylor Swift too.
Either one. Do you have any thoughts? Anyone specifically you like to see?
I was just thinking Giancarlo Esposito might be better as Hades.
I would love to see that, actually. I would love to see.
He's already got that, like, menace. I want to see him play a good guy. I've seen, obviously, Breaking Bad, and then whatever Star Wars thing that he was in, saw some of.
He's Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian.
Okay, yeah. I watched the first season of The Mandalorian, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I scrolled a lot while it was playing, but that's okay. I realize I hate stuff.
You know me. I'm a big nerd, but not in the theater sense. I'm in the nerd of like pop culture nerd. So I've seen all the seasons of The Mandalorian. He's great. He's a really, really good actor. I'll watch Giancarlo Esposito in anything. So having him be Hades actually sounds really good. Like I would watch that.
I like that. I think he's got the stage presence, the command. Well, I don't know if he has stage presence. I've only ever seen him on film, but
I mean, he's got a commanding presence. Heck, I even saw him do improv on Dropout TV. He was I think he was in an episode of Actually, I think, or something like that.
For real?
For real. Like, let me look it up.
This episode is all over the place.
It is. This is what happens when I'm not too tired.
And when I don't have 3 pages of notes. Only have 2. I didn't have enough structure.
Oh, he was on Game Changer. So which makes more
sense.
Makes more sense, yeah. He was on an episode of Game Changer. It was during the pandemic. So it's all like he's not there in person. It's all virtual, but like he's really great on that particular episode of Game Changer too. So it's really good. He's a great improviser, and he's very, very funny as well. And so I think he could probably bring the intensity that Hades needs while also having kind of that tenderness that he shows towards Persephone, whoever that might be. I think Giancarlo Esposito is a great choice for that. Though I don't know if he's a theater performer.
Oh, well, and is he a bass?
And is he a bass? That's also true.
I think we could we could let him sing a lot of it, and we can, disguise the fact that he's not a singer by casting like a Wayne Brady as Hermes.
Oh, I would love to see Wayne Brady as Hermes.
Someone like really charismatic and a really talented performer.
Oh, I would.
And he's a great singer. Like, I think that or like a Titus Burgess, someone like that.
Oh, Titus Burgess would be great too.
I want someone with big expressive eyes who could sing the hell out of it.
Yeah. Oh, I never thought about
And
Wayne
funny.
Brady. Oh, I'd love to see a Wayne Brady as Hermes. That'd be so good.
I'm full of great ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't say that.
You didn't have to.
I won't say that. Let me be more clear. Let me clarify that more. I will not say that.
While you're recording.
What? So what do you think? What for Persephone or for Eurydice?
I mean, honestly, like, I'm not mad about Carrie Underwood. I feel like that needs to be like an adult, like not a 20-something.
Right.
I think Carrie Underwood's like a full-fledged adult, right?
Yeah, surely.
She's got to be like 30s, maybe 40.
She's 40.
She's 40. Great.
Mm-hmm.
That's adulty.
Yeah, for sure.
Or like, I don't know, someone who's like a theater like Amber Riley, maybe.
Okay.
I think maybe she's like, I think she could probably carry the attitude. Persephone as a character doesn't really do anything for me, like this version of Persephone.
Yeah.
But that is, like, that's not a role that I could play.
Right. Well, what about someone like Philippa Sue or
I don't hate that.
who's the other person I'm thinking of? I feel so bad.
Oh, I want like any of the queens from Six.
Any of them?
And well, not Abby Mueller.
Okay.
Any of the other ones. Just because Jane Seymour is like more of a straight character.
Renee Elise Goldsberry is who I was thinking of.
Oh, it's just the cast of Hamilton.
Just the cast of Hamilton. Like, I was thinking of Philippa Sue and then Renee Elise Goldsberry. That's the person I was like, who's the other person? Like, in my head, I was like, who's the other person from Hamilton? And I was like, Renee Elise Goldsberry. She'd be great as
she's great.
Persephone. Though, obviously, like, whoever is Orpheus and Eurydice needs to skew younger for sure. Great.
Yeah.
Even though Reeve Carney is like 40.
Reeve Carney is he's 40. He's also an adult.
Yeah.
A full-grown adult human.
Full-fledged man. Yeah.
I don't know who my Eurydice is. I need someone like, who are the youths into? I feel like that's a role you can stunt cast. Because Eurydice doesn't really, like, things happen to Eurydice. She doesn't do an awful lot of her own volition.
That's true.
So I think that's a role where, like, if you have some really good performers around Eurydice, then that would bring something out, but you don't need that person to necessarily be able to make strong choices on their own. I mean, I think it's great if they can. And
yeah, for sure.
we teach high school. I should know. Olivia Rodrigo.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Or like, I mean, I know, like, when Billie Eilish records music, she's recording in a very specific style.
Right.
Like, she doesn't necessarily have to sing in that style.
Yeah.
Or like an Ariana Grande. It's the same way. Like pop star Ariana Grande has a different voice than when she was musical theater Ariana Grande.
Right, yeah.
So, like, if she could do it not as her pop star persona.
Mm-hmm. I think those are all great choices. You know, I don't think there's anyone. Oh, what about, could you think Annalie Ashford could be Persephone?
Probably. She could be anyone. She's a queen.
Oh, yeah. She wouldn't have to do a British accent either, so that's nice. I don't know if there's anyone I would seriously consider to play Orpheus off the top of my head. I think Orpheus is better as in, like, a more unknown, honestly, or a fresh actor. You could really put either of those two, Orpheus or Eurydice, as a lesser known actor or a fresh actor, and I think that would be great. You know.
Yeah.
I don't think Reeve Carney needed to be in that role. I like Reeve Carney a lot, but I don't think he needed to be in that role. But to be fair, he did need a role to make up for Spider-Man. So I think that's kind of like one of the reasons for me why he was probably cast in the show is like, you know what, you weren't the worst Spider-Man in the world, but that show's bad, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna throw you a bone here, Reeve.
Oh man.
Oh, just wait till the day we talk about Spider-Man. I have a lot
cover
to
that
say.
Someday.
I have a lot to say about Spider-Man. Yeah, so anyone out there listening, what are your thoughts? Tweet at us, let us know at Greatest Show Pod. Tell us if we're wrong or if we're right.
We're not.
Well, for this show, I don't think so. But you know how it is. We can have some polarizing opinions, and that's fine. But yeah, let us tweet at us, send us an email, let us know what we should cover next time.
Yes.
Yeah. And we want to thank you for listening and hope that you join us on the next one. It's the Greatest Show, Man is produced by Brantley Wheeler and Emily Chavone. Our theme song is by the incredibly talented Patrick Duffy. Links to all his social media in the episode description. You can find us on all the socials at Greatest Show Pod. Tweet at Emily and tell her why her opinions are bad and she should feel bad. If you have any suggestions for a musical we should cover in the future, send us an email at thegreatestshowpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. I mean, of these 6 that were nominated, Hadestown, I think, is for sure the front runner there. So I don't want to say that it was like
What was the front runner?
Hadestown. Is that not what I said? What did I say? Hadesville?
You said Hadestown.
Oh, whatever. I didn't think I said that. Did I? Is there even? No, there's nothing on here that even remotely says Harry. So I don't know where that came from. But I mean, we're gonna cut all this anyway. It's fine. Anyway. I'll wait.
It's a crossover musical between Cursed Child and Hadestown.
Hadestown.
Hadestown. Instead of lanterns, they just have their little magic wands.
I'm just going to sit here and let you go off on this and just laugh for 20 minutes.
You know I will, though.
I know. I'm like, we should probably try to move on here because you're going to end up laughing for the next 20 minutes.
Why are you a thief of all my joy?
I think that's why I'm here on this earth, is to steal your joy.